Chris, welcome inside the Kraken's Den. How are you, dude?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
You know, we almost called this show, actually, the Kraken's Den. That was one of the names we threw around. Kraken is in lingo.
It is. I do think we chose the right title, personally.
I think so, too.
Kraken fucks pretty hard, but blue-collar Bitcoin just sends it.
Yeah. I used to drink Kraken back in college, and that stuff messes you up, but it was a good time.
Wait, what is this stuff? Never heard of this stuff.
It's like a black, rum, or we got to look this up now, but it's strong stuff. It's potent.
Kraken.
We need
it's
to
like
start
Four
drinking
Loko.
Kraken on here.
Yeah, that's what Four Loko did a spin move into after they killed a bunch of young kids from college.
Four Loko.
You guys remember that stuff, man?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I just remember one of my buddies drinking Four Loko in a McDonald's parking lot, called it a McDarking lot on accident, and it stuck for years. I haven't called a McDonald's parking lot anything different since. We do joke about the Kraken at work a lot, though. That's like the name for Bitcoin. You work an overtime shift, you got some extra cash floating around, you're working to feed the Kraken. So a little homage to what this show was almost called, folks. Chris, tell us about your day, dude.
Yeah, so I work for Bitcoin Magazine as a multimedia producer. So specifically dealing with a lot of video content coming out of Bitcoin Magazine on our YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, you name it. I also help host a bunch of the Twitter Spaces. So normally I'm the guy on the Twitter handle for that. And just trying to help grow adoption of Bitcoin, basically. That's my day-to-day, basically.
Hell yeah. We've had a couple conversations with you. We went on your podcast a while ago, Amateur Investors. We've been on Bitcoin Magazine Spaces, and it's your turn to come on our turf here. Here's the plan for tonight, folks. A little different than usual format. We're going to basically go popcorn tonight. So each of us have some ideas or themes we might be interested in exploring. We'll start with one, then move to the next. We joked before going, we'll probably get through 2 items in this hour.
Yeah.
But
I think, Dan, what do you think? We should give the honors to Chris to start this off,
yes,
I'd say. What do you think?
I think so. Chris, start us off. We have no clue where you want to go. You take the ball, put it on the tee, and launch it here. Where do you want to start?
All right. Well, I'm going to specifically bump it over to the IRS. So many Bitcoiners' favorite 3-letter agency.
I love talking about the IRS.
I think most people do, to be honest. So they currently have a draft that came out, I believe, this week on Monday, or at least that's when it was getting circulated around, and it had the watermark for the 17th. And it's for a draft of Form 1040. And this is a change to digital assets reporting. Obviously, that encompasses crypto and Bitcoin. This will need Congress and Senate's approval still, but they're trying to push it in based on the wording to be encompassing of the 2020 tax regime. So basically, it's a form that you cannot leave blank. You have to check yes or no. So everyone in the U.S. would have to do this. And it's if you'd received digital assets as payment for property or services, you received a award or reward, or you have to check yes if you received digital assets as a payment, received an award or reward, received digital assets as a result of mining, staking, or similar activities, received it from a hard fork, disposed of digital assets for properties or services, disposed of digital assets in exchange for another digital asset, sold the digital asset, transferred digital assets for free, bona fide gift, or
pretty all-inclusive.
Otherwise disposed of any financial interest in a digital asset. And then things that don't require you to check yes. So there's 3 short things: holding a digital asset in a wallet or an account, transferring a digital asset from one wallet or account that you own to another one, or purchasing digital assets using USD or real currency through any exchange, PayPal, or Venmo. So they're trying to ding a lot of people. Things that really stuck out on here was result of mining or staking. I know staking doesn't apply to Bitcoin as much, but definitely of mining. They want people to basically dox miners. There's a lot of people that do non-KYC mining for sure. Giving it as a gift. So while the sender doesn't, I guess when you're disposing of, or that's what they mean, getting rid of it, you have to report it as tax or getting rid of it. And then also the receiver of receiving a free bona fide gift. So, these small lightning payments or anything like that, And then it wasn't included, but I'm assuming it's kind of wrapped up in there. If you're running a routing node or a Lightning node and you're routing payments, you're receiving small of those sats, they're expecting you to dox that. So like I said, this has not gone through approval with Congress and Senate, but all of the wording was for tax year 2022. So that would be, through December 31st of this year. Obviously, with the reporting date of April 15th is traditionally like the IRS reporting date. So this seems like something that they're trying to cram through. I don't know where this stands. Obviously, we're coming up to Election Day very shortly here in the States. I think this maybe is on the table, and depending on who wins or what happens in Congress and Senate, after November 5th is what they're going to try and push for. But it's very, very interesting.
So just so I have this straight, and so we're all on the same page. So if you buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, store Bitcoin, you don't have to report that at all, assuming you haven't sold any and made any money on it, because obviously they want to tax you on that. The thing that's more concerning and way more, gray for everybody, especially people running Lightning nodes, like how does that work as far as transmitting and receiving Lightning? Did you get into that anymore? Any more detail on that? Because that seems like it becomes very murky.
Yeah,
you're not actually receiving it. You're just becoming a transmitter or are a transmitter.
Yeah, they didn't clarify any of that, which is a little concerning for sure. But yeah, it seems receiving, or similar activities. I guess that's what it falls under. But yeah, I don't know how that goes or how they want to report it or anything. Like I said, this hasn't gone through yet, and I hope it doesn't go through. Honestly, I know that this just seems like a vast overreach, but definitely seems like something a lot of people have been missing or have not been paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, in my view, no surprise whatsoever that this is coming down the pipeline. Yeah, it may be a little bit more exhaustive. I guess I'm not an expert to comment on this, but not much different from the expectation of having money in other asset classes. Yeah, I think I'll get labeled as a cuck by some people from saying this, but getting audited by the IRS seems far-fetched and impossible until it happens to you. So I don't know what my advice is. It's either shut the fuck up or plan to play by the rules. And if you're buying KYC Bitcoin and you're planning to never pay taxes and you have a huge Bitcoin position, I think at some point in the future someone may come knocking. But that's for you to decide how you want to proceed with. I think we're just stating kind of the facts. And I guess the other comment I have on it is they're just starting to pay a ton more attention to this. The fake internet money is no longer looking quite so fake, gentlemen. We've got White House research and reports. We've got the IRS ramping up on it. Obviously,
87,000 new IRS agents ready to fist your asshole when you make forget the dot on I or cross a T on your tax return. So yeah, be aware.
This is not a drill anymore. This is a real asset class. And I think a lot of these policymakers and regulators are aware. I think some of them are aware of where it may head and the potential it has, and it's going to accrue a ton of value. And Uncle Sam's going to want his. No surprise there.
Yeah. Well, especially like we've had this discussion, Dan, on this podcast a couple of different times now where tax receipts are going down next year. Capital gains taxes are not going to produce. They're going to be, expending tons more money rolling over this $9 trillion in bonds that are going to be at 4 to 5% right now, equaling 3x what they're paying in interest payments right now. It's going to be rough to be, Uncle Sam. He's going to be looking to turn everyone upside down and shake the pennies out of your pocket or the sats out of your node.
It's going to be going from eating steak to table scraps, and he's going to get every single one of them. But this doesn't, I think this is another area we could explore here is first hog reference of the episode. This is the essence of the slippery hog. Like you regulate a version of an open source protocol in the year 2022 with no real understanding of where it may be going in 6 months, 2 years, 10 years, certainly beyond that. And this thing has the ability and the likelihood to morph into something in many ways unrecognizable on layers above than where it is today, which is going to make regulating this thing extremely challenging, especially from like a fungibility tracking privacy standpoint.
It'll be very interesting, though. It says, or other real currencies, obviously, to purchase Bitcoin or digital assets. So what if El Salvador comes in and be like, well, it's technically our real currency for our economy. And then it's like, it didn't specify, but it says using USD or other real currencies. And so that means using euro, yen, if you're doing the exchange, you're obviously getting hit with the exchange rate of that. But like, it's definitely up for legalese to say, well, this is a real currency. And then that's a whole nother debate. And I'm not a lawyer and I don't know, but definitely very interesting to say the least of, if you're going to try and hit us with all these things, well, then maybe Bitcoin's a real currency. I know that they don't want to classify it as that, but we'll see.
For sure. Will this be legal tender in our lifetime? And if it is, what impact is that going to have on, supposed tax implications that are in our head right now? And obviously jurisdictional movement and arbitrage is easier said than done, but will there be areas you can go on this planet where the tax implications are very different?
Puerto Rico,
sure that will be the case.
Yeah, Puerto Rico is definitely one of them where you're not under the purview of the IRS with that because they're not a state, but they're still like a territory, I guess. So, we're just all the Bitcoiners are going to move to Puerto Rico and just live on that little island, build it up.
Think about the game theory there, though. I mean, you've got, let's just paint a picture of, a bullish Bitcoin here. We got $1 million Bitcoin years 2027. This thing's got a, $2-3 trillion market cap or more than that to do the math on that. But
5
you've
trillion?
got, somewhere. Yeah, you're right.
Somewhere in that
trillion-ish. Yep. And you've got wealthy Bitcoiners in this massive diaspora all over the world, and you suddenly open up the opportunity for them to come in and harvest a lot more of their wealth because of your tax strategy. You're going to have a lot of money flowing in. I mean, this is obviously what El Salvador is already hatching, but if the incentives are there and it's beneficial for an area, jurisdiction, or a country, you better believe that, especially a lot of more disenfranchised, second and third world entities are going to bite and take that opportunity.
I think it's pretty obvious that at least now Texas, Wyoming, a lot of these states are positioning themselves to have that. Maybe it's like an El Salvador light, like it's way easier for one of the three of us to decide, I'm going to Texas than it is to be like, I'm going to cut cord and I'm going to El Salvador. That's a much bigger leap. I mean, we love talking about El Salvador, but I mean, the three of us know, like, number one, like, this is an entirely different country where the three of us are not very familiar with the actual laws there. Like, how free are they really? How good is, Bukele really? These are lawn darts that I'd prefer not to toss. Even though you're getting maybe you get much more freedom as far as the financial front, but there's other considerations as well than just uprooting your family and moving to a country that, 10 to 15 years ago was like the murder capital of the world. So, yeah, I think Wyoming, Texas, Idaho, those kinds of states are going to be, and even those non-states like Puerto Rico are going to be much more likely to change their laws in a way that's going to give the capacity for people to move there long before they start, jumping out of the United States altogether. Although that's always on the table, especially when people have the ability to do it with their wealth intact, which is probably the biggest impediment to people immigrating to other countries in the past for forever.
Yeah. Well, we have to, while we're on this, we have to identify the fact that Bitcoin allows that sort of movement. You know what I mean? When we talk about how it's traced and tracked and transported, it's maybe the first asset that's really going to be impossible to implement certain capital controls on, right? It's a completely new ball game than any other way that you can store wealth.
Yeah. The realistic way, I mean, if we're going to be dead honest about like what the capacity of government is to take your Bitcoin, it really comes down to they can put you in a cage and they can put a gun to your head. So although it's very cute that we think, it's true, we can hide our money from them in perpetuity, but they can put you in a cage in perpetuity. So, yeah. I mean, there is that.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's fungible, but not Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yep. Back to the IRS. Back to the IRS knocking on your door. Chances are good you're going to cower like a simpy bitch when they do. So
yeah, they're going
to
probably
best to stay above water there.
Wow.
Josh, you want to take
I feel like we we cucked down pretty hard right there. We really
yeah,
need to
we did.
recover.
We just lost a huge percentage of our audience. Hey, we're just shooting straight, man. I have
know.
a good job, a good career, and a family, and a house.
I feel like
that
actually
and
this
family
parlays
nearby.
really well.
Yeah.
This parlays really well into the topic I wanted to bring up, and I thought this would be fun to talk about with the two of you guys. And this is a wide-ranging, open topic that we could go on for a long time, but it's basically the overriding idea of conspiracy theories. So, I mean, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was the kind of person who not only loved reading about these things, I still do. It's always interesting to read about these theories and like how off the wall some of them can get. But I guess the one I'm really kind of pointing at is this giant conspiracy that some people believe that this one world government is trying to form, and these disparate agents, the WEF, all of these people are trying to coerce us all into this one world government, this evil, Nazi-esque charade. Here's the thing. I think this is very, very similar to creationism versus Darwinism. Like, if you think about the way, and the reason this is so appealing to people is because if you want to believe that conspiracies, like there's one giant conspiracy and these people are controlling the world, that's very similar to creationism, and it's comforting to people that someone's in charge, someone is figuring this out. Even though they may not think it's a good thing, they feel like there's somebody in control and this isn't just all chaos. And the other side of that, the counterpoint would be, this is all just chaos. It's like Darwinism. It's literally survival of the fittest. It's a bunch of disparate groups all vying for control, failing, fucking it up, and then it all coming around again. So I guess what I'd really like to open this up to is, let's discuss that. What are your views on that? Do you think this is just chaos proliferating in the world? Or do we think that there really is some giant conspiracy, some people pulling puppet strings?
Chris, you go first if you got some.
There's lots of, I don't know. I guess it's kind of a combination of both, if I had to say. Like, being an engineer, or my previous degree, and what I've done in the past is in engineering. I'm a chemical engineer by degree. And when we were doing chemical reactions or trying to just create a product, you're trying to basically use math and science to create a product. And by doing that, it's very complex with heating, cooling, pressure, all these different things. And it's basically like controlled chaos. You're trying to create something. And when you're doing that, it is very, very difficult to do, even at a small scale in the lab, and then scaling it up to plant-size production. So I was just in that small little niche environment of a plant of 100 people, and it was chaos. So, yes, I guess there's people that would love more power and control, but at the same time, you're fighting nature. Like, you're trying to fight nature to control everything. So while I do believe there's some people that would like that, like, it's difficult enough to create like a widget, like a pen. Like, think of how difficult and how many people it took to making this pen.
Yep.
And yet there's some people that think like, oh, we can control the whole world. It's like, it takes like hundreds or thousands of people to make this fucking thing. You think they're going to fucking control like 7.6 billion people?
I think it goes back to, this is kind of like weather predictions, right? Like, you can be pretty damn sure that tomorrow's weather prediction is going to be accurate because the amount of variables that are going to change in the period of time between now and tomorrow, pretty low overall. But now you extrapolate that out a week, a month, a year, 10 years. The amount of compute you would have to do in order to kind of predict that is every single variable that exists, like every atomic particle that's existing in the earth and all of these different geothermal events that are going on, like, impossible. So I agree with you. Like, to a degree, people can plan, maybe think 3-4 steps ahead, but to plan something that is going to be an overriding conspiracy over a long period of time, say 50 to 100 years, that's like trying to predict the weather in 10 years. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I'll add one more point and then I'll let Dan go. But like, think of it like this. Like, Paul Krugman said in 2005, like, the internet's going to be a passing fad, like, no more important than the typewriter. And now the dude has to use the internet to stay relevant. Like, if he wasn't on the internet, we wouldn't know who he is. I mean, the first iPhone came out in 2007, and that's only 15 years ago. And like, think of how monumental the iPhone is in the App Store and what it created and what it does and making smartphones do everything. Like everyone thought like, oh, you're going to have a camera, you're going to have a calculator, you're going to have a calendar, you're going to have all these, like now you just have a fucking smartphone, whether it's an iPhone or not, like you have a smartphone that can do it all. So I think to your point, it's very hard to predict even the smartest and brightest minds. Maybe that's giving Paul Krugman too much credit. I don't think he's one of those, but even the smartest minds, it's difficult for them to predict 10 to 15 years. I mean, look at Michael Saylor in 2013. He's like, yeah, Bitcoin's just like a passing fad, not going to do that. And, you know, you have to go through an experience to see what it would be used for. And I think even like Steve Jobs with creating the iPhone, everyone thought like, I always want my keyboard. I never don't want a keyboard. And then he created this and people are like, oh, fuck, I love this thing. I don't need a keyboard. Like, I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry, I took your thunder there.
No, love it. Love this topic, Josh. This is something that Josh and I enjoy bouncing around in the locker room at work or at a meal. Okay, so first, one thing I want to piggyback on is I could not resonate more with your statement that, in essence, people crave answers. They crave simplicity, right? They want to know what's going on. And so they generate worldviews and ideas and frameworks that give them answers. Not having a good answer is a very uncomfortable position. It's a journey I'm on in life right now. I grew up in a conservative religious context where I thought the world was quite ordered and very clearly one worldview was the right way to do it. In adulthood, I've journeyed away from that, and that's in many ways fulfilling and life-giving, but it's also wildly uncomfortable. I think in a lot of things in life, the truest thing you can say is I have no fucking idea what's going on. And so when I think about complex, world order, conspiracy theory type shit, I think there's sort of 3 options for what's at play. We look at the world and we think this is a shit show. And guess what? Pretty much every Homo sapien that's ever walked the face of the earth has thought that the world is a complete shit show. Our kids, their kids, every generation thinks it's fucking different this time and that the world's all fucked. This is just the human condition, right? So we look at that disorder, that chaos, and there's sort of 3 conclusions people make. The first one is that all the people, quote unquote, in charge are malevolent, evil people, right? They intentionally are hatching plans that are evil and misguided and creating this chaos and disorder. The second, maybe more common presupposition or conclusion is that these people are just total idiots. This is one of the most common ones within the Bitcoin religion, if you will, is that everybody in charge is a complete fucking idiot. Well, guess what? If you were put in charge of the chaos of ordering this species and just handed what came before you, by the way, you weren't here in 1910. Guess what? You're Fed chairman in 2022. You got to try to tape this thing together with sticks and bubble gum. These people are not idiots. I'm not saying there's not evil and bad people. I'm not saying they're not idiots, but by and large, I don't think that hits the mark. And then comes the third option. This is the more the way I see it, is that the world is incredibly complex. People really don't know what to do. These solutions are almost impossible to enact. And this is compounded by the fact that the system's broken. If we're just talking about the monetary system, this is a decades, centuries long problem that these people have inherited. And so it's just the complexity of the issue that is causing us to suppose that everyone, quote unquote, in charge is an idiot or an evil person, which, I mean, cue Bitcoin here. This is why we need to fix things from the ground up. We need to realign incentives from the very bottom, which is the whole point of open protocols like Bitcoin. And the whole reason the 3 of us are so passionate about it is that it actually has a chance. Unlike the people in charge, it has a chance to reorder society in a meaningfully helpful way, in my view.
Yeah. Something that's not corruptible from the baseline is the antidote to corruption at the top. I wholeheartedly believe. Sorry to cut you off, Chris. Go ahead.
No worries. My best friend, we were just talking recently, and we were recalling when he was in high school, he got selected by one of the teachers to go to DC to basically recreate, basically the how Senate, Congress, and all of that works, like basically the U.S. government. And he went down, and it was kids from all over the country. I think he said there was like about 150, 200 people in total. And he actually got elected president. You start off and they do icebreakers and all this. Anyway, he gets elected president, and each person was given a role of like, oh, like, okay, so he's the president of the United States. Then like one person was representing Senate, Congress, Secretary of State, all this. And then everyone else was basically world leaders. And the way it was run was really cool that each of the world leaders was given papers of like what their demands were. But their demands are completely or maybe counter to the US or counter to their allying nations. Like one kid was the prime minister of Israel. And then another person was the prime minister of like Jordan and like all the surrounding countries. So you have the whole Middle East going on. Then you've got like someone that was representing the EU or various countries in the EU. And it was a cool experiment because he's like, yeah, everyone, he got elected president of the United States. And he's like, yeah, you think it's going to be awesome. It's going to be so cool. And then they just kind of like unleash hell on him. And he's like, you're getting bombarded with like your Secretary of State's like, I got to talk to you. And of course the teachers are making it interesting saying, hey, this just came on your desk. We need a decision now. And people are like yelling at him. And he just said like, it really shows perspective of like, it's the system being broken and not so much individual people like you were pointing out, Dan, that, you know, it's, you're stuck by your incentives and you're overwhelmed with information and inputs. And obviously you have friends and alliances and, you know, they were incorporating in ways of like, oh, your VP tells you to do this. And like, you know, by not doing what he or she says, you fuck over this country, but like you're in the same government as them. So like you're kind of forced into doing that. And then, you know, oh, well, when you fuck over this country, then they're not going to trade you cheap goods. So then like, you know, it's this whole cabal.
Second, third order effects.
Mess. Yeah, exactly. This whole mess of everything going on. And he said it was a real eye opener. He's like, I definitely give more respect to politicians where it's definitely easy to punch up or to punch on them basically. But yeah, just it points out that the system is broken. And ultimately they didn't go down the rabbit hole. This was years ago. I don't even think Bitcoin was around when he actually did this. But yeah, it just points out the system is definitely broken. And, you know, we're trying to build exactly what you said, from the ground up to build a whole new system.
For sure.
Dan, what do you got?
All right. I want to talk about the housing market, and I want to start by just divulging some math I did today on my house. And I'm going to go ahead and share numbers to be transparent here. Hopefully nobody can figure out where I live based on this, but it's not going to, these numbers aren't going to surprise based on what Josh and I do for a living. But what I want to do is explain how much different buying a house in my subdivision is between today and 2018. I bought my house in 2018. Okay. So here's the math on this. And then we're going to talk about broader housing market implications. And let's take it down to the individual and talk about how it matters for wage earners and people that aren't, you know, rolling in it. So I bought my house in 2018 for $235,000. Okay. Based on my estimates in the area I live today, that house would go for around 320 based on comparables in my subdivision. I feel pretty comfortable with that, having done some research today. We're gonna assume 20 down. I know a lot of Bitcoiners wouldn't do that, but just we'll get out of PMI and go 20 down. My interest rate that I have is 3.27%. So my mortgage payment, this is without taxes, which by the way, percentage wise are some of the highest in the entire country where we live. The rest of my payment exceeds the amount of my mortgage for anyone that's wants to know how dramatic it is. But we're just going to talk mortgage here. My mortgage payment is around $820 for a 30-year fixed mortgage. If I was to sell this house today to somebody for $320,000, which we'll talk, and maybe the housing market will drastically correct it, right? It likely will. But at today's going rate for a 30-year fix, which I look is 7.24%. That mortgage payment is $1,744. It is well more than double what my mortgage payment is. Well more than double.
And that's excluding tax still.
That's excluding that. We're just talking
tax.
Mortgage. We're just talking mortgage payment. It would be more than twice as expensive monthly. We're talking monthly payment to own my house right now 4 years after I bought it. This is crazy. The math was even more dramatic than I was expecting. It's got huge implications, like the type of, I could probably still afford this house, but for a lot of people, they would be unable to afford the house they're currently living in, right? It's just gotten so much more expensive. And then the other factor that it makes me consider is just how unwilling I'm going to be to exit this agreement. Like at this interest rate,
You can't.
at the
You
price
can't.
I paid, like the reason for me to leave and sell. So now we're talking about two reasons why the market has the potential to lock up, right? Is that it's gotten just so much more expensive. And then with interest rate expense, like who's going to let go of their house? I was in the paramedic room yesterday. I was on the ambulance, and in the background, it was MSNBC Power Lunch. They had some housing expert on, and the word that came out of his mouth, I wrote it down, or this phrase was, "There's no option but a hard landing for housing at this point." Thoughts on the housing market, guys? Because it's pretty unreal how quickly it's changed.
You want to go first, Josh?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was giving it to you if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't run those numbers on my house. If I did, it would be staggering, just like it is for you. Like the thought that if I walked into this place, paid probably 50 to 100 grand more than I paid for it in 2020, and then had to deal with 7.25%, and like I don't think I would do it. I know for sure that I'm not even considering moving, even if I wanted a different house, because of those numbers that you mentioned. And in my mind, it seems completely obvious that something has to give. Like these people are losing their jobs. Like the economy's rolling over right now. There's going to be probably foreclosure. I mean, I don't think that it's going to be a complete catastrophe for housing like it was in 2008 and 9, but there's absolutely no way that this can perpetuate. It's just incredibly crushing for anyone that wants to go buy a house right now.
Right.
Like I just don't see how this can continue. Like who's going to be the next buyer?
Right. One thing I want to throw in, because we went through the specific math, because there's someone sitting here going, you spend $820 a month. No, I spend like $1,800 a month, right? Based on if you had taxes, home insurance, all that other stuff for my escrow payment. But in this new scenario, now this person is going from, in my situation, spending, let's say, $1,800 a month to now spending approaching $3,000. That is a huge, huge deal for the average wage earner, right? Someone that's making between, let's say, $40,000 and $140,000. That's a monthly jump that's really, really significant, especially for someone that's like already close to redlined, right? You've got someone renting an apartment somewhere for $2,300 that's like, hey, I want to buy a house. Well, you're going to be buying a freaking shanty.
Right. And most financial planners will recommend something like 20% of your, gross income goes to your house. Is it gross or net? I can't remember now off the top of my head, but anyway, 20%. And so $3,000 to be 20% of your income is very unlikely for most people. I mean, I don't know what the average wage is right now, maybe 80 grand. So if you have a wife, maybe if you're lucky, making 160, you're going to have a hard time keeping that under 20% so that you can actually save some money to retire someday and not work until you're 85 years old, being a Walmart greeter, and thinking about putting a pistol in your mouth every day.
Right. And this is, before I hand it to you, Chris, this is just what this does is it ties up cash flow. You're just going to have way more people that need a house or choose to enter a house they probably shouldn't, and their cash flow is not going to be freed up. I think that's my biggest warning to the listenership. I don't know what the answer is here. And especially for the younger guys we work with, this is a predicament, right? But I don't know in what way, shape, or form, but no matter what place you're living and where you lay your head at night, you need to have free cash flow to feed the Kraken and do some other things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was just running some quick numbers, Dan, off that. So if we're assuming 1,800 for easy math, and we're going up to $3,000 now as your payment as well, that's a 66% increase. And if you're dividing that from 2018, like when you said you moved into now 2022, let's just call it 4 years, that's 16.5% year over year inflation rate on housing. Yeah. I know that had peaked more in 2020 and 2022 because of locking up demand and printing a bunch of money. So I get that it was come more in the last 18 months to 24 months. But still, I mean, 16% or 16.5 year over year inflation in housing alone of purchasing a house is that's a phenomenal return. Yeah, that's a phenomenal return. If you think the S&P 500 averages 9% a year before all the craziness of COVID, like it's slipping away from the average earner to be able to buy a property or a home for themselves.
You know what's
go ahead.
Just to throw this in, I was listening to somebody, can't remember who the other day, but a lot of these investment banks have been buying up properties in mass over the last 4 or 5 years. Just single family homes being bought up by Goldman Sachs and BlackRock, a couple of, for example, wouldn't it be kind of, I mean, nobody wants to see the regular person get crushed by the housing market here, but it would be kind of delicious to watch those investment banks get absolutely clobbered over the head when this thing just turns around on them.
I don't see how it's not going to. I mean, like, significantly. I'm no expert at this in this arena, but just looking at your own behavior, like, we are the buyers and the sellers. And what are the incentives telling you? They're telling me stay put. And I think a lot of people are going to be waiting this out. And I think there could be wisdom in doing that. Although it's dangerous. Sitting on the sideline is dangerous too. That printer fires back up, things turn the other way, and the circus starts. The clown noses go back on, and this thing could just keep going up 16% a year. It's hard to know what the solution is.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our show sponsors. BCB is brought to you by Crowd Health. With open enrollment upon us, what if you didn't have to pay healthcare premiums anymore? What if you could invest in Bitcoin instead? With Crowd Health, you can put money aside for health expenses in your own account and even hold a large part of it in Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes up, you get the upside, not big insurance companies. Pay one low monthly total to fund an account that is yours. Choose your doctors and hold up to 75% of the funds in Bitcoin. If a large expense comes up, Crowd Health will crowdfund the bill for you to pay it quickly. Stop supporting the broken health insurance system with your hard-earned capital. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use code BLUE now to experience freedom from health insurance by utilizing Bitcoin. Right now, through the end of the year, you can get your first 6 months for just $99 per month. Don't get stuck in a bad insurance plan again. Instead, go to joincrowdhealth.com and use code BLUE to sign up. That's joincrowdhealth.com, promo code BLUE. Crowd Health is not health insurance. It's a totally different way of paying for healthcare. Terms and conditions apply.
Blue Collar Bitcoin is sponsored by Capital Logistics. Capital Logistics is a freight broker connecting truck drivers and shipping partners around North America. A true blue-collar business that supports Blue Collar Bitcoin. Capital Logistics specializes in moving temperature-controlled cargo, food, supplies, and other freight nationwide for some of America's largest companies. Capital Logistics is a firm believer that people and businesses should be able to save what they earn without having their purchasing power manipulated by the financial system. As early adopters of innovative systems throughout their business, Capital's excess cash flow is put into Bitcoin every month. If you want to work with a company that shares blue-collar values and an affinity for Bitcoin, reach out to Capital Logistics today. Find them online at capitallogisticsllc.com. That's capitallogisticsllc.com. Blue Collar Bitcoin podcast is sponsored by Ledden. From savings accounts to personal loans to even mortgages, Ledden's financial services enable Bitcoiners to experience the benefits of holding today without selling their Bitcoin. With recent events in the lending market, Ledden has demonstrated that their robust and transparent risk management strategy was the reliable approach. Ledden doesn't actively trade or invest in DeFi yield generation, and they've experienced zero losses as a result of their strategy. Ledden only supports Bitcoin and USDC, two of the highest quality, most liquid assets in the industry. They are also dedicated to transparency, and they are the first digital asset lending company to complete a proof of reserves attestation, which they re-verify every 6 months. With multilingual support on standby 24/7, Ledden is truly there to support customer needs. Go to ledden.io, that's LEDN.io, for more details. And by visiting start.ledden.io/blue collar Bitcoin, you can receive $10 USDC for creating and funding an account.
The Blue Collar Bitcoin podcast is powered by arguably the most legendary company in Bitcoin, CoinKite. Use promo code BCB for 5% off select purchases, including the cold card, at CoinKite.com. Established Block 141,000, CoinKite is an industry leader in security and hardware manufacturing. They are producers of the renowned Cold Card, the world's most trusted and secure Bitcoin signing device or hardware wallet. It's built with a plethora of features fit for Bitcoin beginners all the way up to the most advanced of users. This device is a one-stop shop for your Bitcoin custody needs. CoinKite also manufactures the Block Clock, a gorgeous e-ink digital art display piece sitting in the background of every serious Bitcoiner on planet Earth. Block Clock can be programmed to scroll through key Bitcoin metrics including price, hash rate, the next halving date, and much more. CoinKite are also the makers of the Open Dime, a small USB stick that allows you to spend Bitcoin like a dollar bill, passing it along multiple times. Check out CoinKite's entire suite of products at CoinKite.com. Now back to the show.
We're operating on one ring of the circus right now, and they could fire the other rings back up anytime.
Yeah.
Chris, what else you got?
turn.
You got another topic for us?
Yeah, so I'll go one more doom and gloom for each of us. Or I don't know your topics, but I have one more doom and gloom, and then
Dude,
I'll
this
end
is
on
a bear
on high
market,
note.
man. We're doing doom and gloom all fucking day.
Doom and gloom all day. So this one I called as like Fiat House of Cards is falling down. So pivoting from more of the housing market over to our friends over in Europe. So Germany, there was a company, German construction company that has been around 125 years. And it's currently insolvent. There's another German confectionery manufacturer that was around for 130 years and is now insolvent. A German automotive supplier that was around for 156 years and it's insolvent. And then 170 years for a German soap manufacturer. So what was the significance of all these? Obviously, all of them have been operating a business over 100 years. But they went all insolvent within 24 hours of each other. So this report came out on Tuesday or Wednesday. To point it out, like Germany is the powerhouse of manufacturing hub in the EU, and it's kind of like lifting the debt of the pigs or the pig nations, Portugal, Ireland, Italy, Greece, and Spain. So going a little bit macro here, as of right now, Christine Lagarde, everyone's favorite central banker, is saying that she wants anti-separationists of the EU. So she wants policies that keeps the EU together. Germany is the powerhouse of the EU economy. They are literally a manufacturing hub. They, they export the most. They have the most amount of fiat currencies piling into that nation. When you have businesses that have been running for, you gents, you're running an LLC here. I've dabbled in it. Running a small business is difficult. These businesses have run the gambit. Not only have they been through 2 world wars, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, they've also had the hyperinflation events of Weimar Germany, because they are literally Germany. So it is just, they survived hyperinflation and they're getting wiped out or insolvent right now. Like, that's how bad it is. They survived hyperinflation. Like, let's put that into perspective. The German mark looks like a shit coin, like going parabolic or collapsing at least. And they survived that, and this is what wipes them out. So like try to wrap your minds around that. Like, operating a business for 100 years, and these 4 businesses that have been around over 100 years, longer than most people, anyone on the planet's been alive, and they're going out of business all within 24 hours.
It also didn't seem like there's any common denominator between them. They're all very different businesses. There's no, it's not like they're in the same industry and they had some cascading problem in that industry. Yeah. Well, I wonder, guys, really what it, go ahead.
I mean, it seems quite obvious to me, and I know this is where you're going with this, but like, we're coming out. I think one way to think about where rates are headed right now is we're moving towards a more realistic cost of capital. Like, if it, I know it's still fiat and all this stuff, but if you think about how much should money cost, we're moving closer to reality, right, on rates. And we've been living in a world where that has been totally distorted for an incredibly long period of time. I mean, companies, to stay competitive, to stay afloat, have been incentivized to run at red line, to lever up to their freaking eyeballs. And now all of a sudden the Band-Aid is coming off really quickly and it's tearing tissue. It's coming off so fast, and they are having to reprice their entire strategy on a new cost of capital way more suddenly than they were expecting. And that's why it's not surprising to me.
It's not only in the financial realm, like they probably had to lever themselves up to be competitive, right? But they also did just-in-time delivery of everything. So they don't have any supply on hand. They don't have, everything is just in time. And this whole COVID thing probably put a huge wrench into that. Now, on top of that, you pile on the fact that you have to re-up their debt. They can't afford to make minimum payments at, let's just assume their rates are similar to the mortgage rates we talked about. They were at 3% a couple of years ago. Now they have to re-up it at 7%. It's not possible for them, and they're bankrupt, and they're done. And those two things in and of themselves could easily do it. Probably the both.
And the worst thing is Germany's like, I know stealing a line from Greg Voss. He's like, yeah, they're the best crack house on the street. So like, the Portugals, Ireland's, Italy's, Greece, and Spain are going to get clobbered because they're the ones that are propping up the debt of these bad countries. And Germany has a fuck ton of bad debt right now. We're seeing it in real time.
I think the real question is, and I'm interested to hear your opinions on this. how long can the EU hold together with this kind of a situation? Like, how long are people in Germany going to be okay with stringing along these other countries that are simply not performing? They are literally dragging dead bodies, and they have to keep dragging them through a swamp, and they can't let them go.
It is
when will they
absolute
relinquish
mess.
it?
I mean, with the fiscal situation there is crazy. I mean, when you have central bank and treasury and you got all these different incentives going on, all these different governing bodies going on, it reminds me of like what happens in a family when like a patriarch or matriarch dies and you've got all these different siblings. It's like, Joey spent 78 grand 6 years ago on blah, blah, blah. I deserve this. You know what I mean? And everybody kind of starts squabbling and it starts falling apart because everybody is in a different position. There's different needs on how to bail out different countries. And at the same time, those voting publics want the same treatment. Like Italy's going to get all this and we're not, right? If you're the Germans. It just, without being an expert, it seems so messy and so much more. It is so much more complex than what's going on even stateside. Even
just thinking about uniting the EU the way it is now, like the states are all fairly similar. Like we all have the same culture for the most part. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit different from Florida to California, but we're not talking about Italy versus Sweden or, a different language, a different culture. Everything is entirely different, and trying to unite all these completely different people who all had their own independent currencies for a very long time prior, and then deciding we're just going to ball them all together and create this giant block of countries that's all going to cooperate economically. That's just doesn't seem like something that's tenable for a long period of time, especially when they're so far aside each other as far as their financial condition.
And then you add an energy crisis, which is probably the impetus for a lot of the disparity and struggle. And when, back to my point before, when one starts to fall and needs all this help, it's not fair to the others. But what are you supposed to do? Just stand there and let the thing suffocate? It's back to complex solutions.
Dude, sometimes you got to take Yeller out back.
Not easy. Yeah.
You got to take Yeller out back and put a bullet in his head sometimes, It's unfortunate.
Is that Italy in this scenario, or who are we talking?
I don't know, man. It could be. I'm not going to name any names. Yeller could be whoever you think he is.
As Italian heritage, it's Italy. We could say it's Italy. I approve the message.
Yeah, good topic. It's a mess.
All right, I've got another one for you guys. So Elon Musk, always something to talk about with this guy. He's an intriguing character always. So I think the most interesting thing he's been up to lately is, obviously we all know he's taken over Twitter. Maybe this day, maybe this week he is, maybe next week he's not. So there's been that going on. But the more interesting thing in my mind is his Starlink satellite constellation. He's been working on this for years. What SpaceX has done with rockets is amazing. And because there's not enough customers to actually use the things, they're like, well, fuck it, we'll build a satellite constellation because this is going to be useful. Well, now this has put him at odds with the White House because now a single private citizen has the ability to control internet over the entire world, which is really fucking cool, really Bond villain cool. And it's interesting that a single guy is now in a position where nation states, the superpower of the world, is intimidated by this guy. And now they're talking about, investigating his business dealings with Twitter, censoring him potentially with SpaceX, with their Starlink satellites, telling him what he can and can't do with it. But it's kind of hilarious to me that they're in a position where they're having to beg, borrow, and steal from a billionaire as a superpower country and say, please, can you please do this for us because we're asking nicely. So SpaceX has been funding Ukraine's internet to the tune of $80 million so far. And he basically said, Pentagon, you need to start banning up because we can't just have SpaceX continue to pay for this into perpetuity. But he ended up relenting and saying, fine, I'll do it because I'm sure he got a shitload of political pressure. But I'm curious what you guys think about the situation, not only with Starlink, but with Twitter.
I'll take it first. I think it's very interesting, the position that I guess the U.S. finds themselves in, that, we're an economic superpower. And to your point, we're like kowtowing or begging a billionaire to do what they wanted to do. With all the resources we have, the U.S. couldn't compete in the free market for space. And I know there was a running joke with Trump doing a Space Force and all that. And, he like quite literally outcompeted them. I know a lot of people say, well, he got a lot of subsidies, and that may be true, but just what he's been able to do is an engineering feat in and of itself, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually watched there's a documentary, I think it's on Disney Plus is where I saw it, about the Falcon Heavy launch. Josh, you may be able to tell me when the first one went up. But it is
February 2018.
Yeah, dude, Josh is a huge space nerd. Freaking loser. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. It's incredible. Like, the documentary was awesome.
I cried.
What it makes me think about is how quickly this shit moves, though. SpaceX was founded in what? 08?
2002, I think.
Oh, earlier than that. Okay, yeah, so it kind of meanders along for a long period of time. Tons of failures. They went through the rocket failures. And now, I mean, the cadence with which they're launching, the success rate with which they're launching, and the size of these rockets they're putting up in the air, and the load that they can carry, the improvements have been, dare we say, exponential. And
I'd say orders of magnitude. Yeah, easily.
Where's it going to be in 10 years, dude? It's going to be so far ahead. Watching that documentary was just another example for me of how quickly this shit moves. You blink, you haven't paid attention to it in a couple of years, and they're doing something completely different with totally different implications. The internet, the idea of global internet, right? Anywhere, anytime, any place, is a huge gap right now, you could say, based on where we're at in a lot of places.
Think about the implications there. Like, you read something like the sovereign individual, and then you see things like SpaceX putting up internet satellites that can, feed the entire world high-speed internet. And you think about all those places. Then we talk about, now you dovetail in the fact that Bitcoin mining allows energy to be prosperous in places it could never be before. And then you multiply that by the fact that now we have internet on a worldwide scale available anywhere. And the ability for nation states or internet nations to exist just leveled up, like right now. I mean, it really is playing out in a way that I could see it going that direction, where people really do have communities of other like-minded people, and maybe don't live in the exact same place, but are in a way a nation together online.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
That is sovereign individual thesis 101 in a dramatic way. It's like the next leap in sovereignty, you could say, in a lot of ways.
Dude, and the fact that it's not controlled, at least not yet, by any government. There's no government that's going to just shut it down. And I don't know exactly how these nodes work with SpaceX, or who they have to interoperate with on the ground to actually feed this internet service back and forth. But it is encouraging to see this kind of stuff happening. And there's competing companies that are starting to put up satellites to have competing constellations as well. So they'll have some redundancy.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I forget what the law is, where like emerging nations or emerging countries, they get to skip technology levels. So like, instead of putting up I know exactly what you're talking about. Instead of putting up like,
telephone poles.
Telephone poles and all that, you can just skip right to like Wi-Fi and using like satellites and stuff like this and linking up with Starlink. I forget what the law is, but it like helps emerging nations, I don't want to say catch up and pass, but it definitely helps them like bridge the gap of technologies.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't have to do antiquated technologies. They can just use the latest and greatest stuff, and it helps really level up their society faster with less waste.
And let's cue Bitcoin again here. I just tweeted something from an Elise Clean quote. Bitcoin is fintech for poor people. Guess who's probably, in my view, potentially never going to have a banking account the way we know it today? Disenfranchised folks in the third world, that this is their first opportunity, their first introduction to financial infrastructure. They're going to leapfrog the entire banking system as we know it today, or have the potential to do that. It's so dramatic, and the addressable market on that and the implications on that are mind-blowing. But guess what's the only way that's going to work at broad, reliable scale is with a protocol that can't be fucked with.
Yeah, I mean, look at El Salvador. Like, literally, Bitcoin was banking more people in a year than local banks and banks were for 30, 50 years. So however long it was. Like Bitcoin did more in a year's time to bank the unbanked than local banks, which is absurd.
Before we get off the topic of rockets, I think this is kind of an interesting analogy. What Elon Musk did for rocket technology, because honestly, it had stagnated since the 50s and 60s. All of the big step change improvements. Right, yeah. Exactly. All those big step change improvements happened into the 60s, early 70s. It had kind of petered out and nothing happened after that. It was basically just, the big Boeings and all, ULAs of the world did as little as they had to do to just collect as much taxpayer money as they could. So in a lot of ways, they're similar to the monetary system in the United States as it is now. They were functional at a base minimum level, didn't do anything extra because they didn't have to. And then suddenly a competitor came along that upended everything, flipped the table over, and started really innovating really quickly. And now those old aerospace companies are basically fucked. Like the only reason they exist anymore is because Congress lobbies and gets them contracts. There's no reason for them to be around. They can't compete on cost. And that's kind of where the Fed is as far as Bitcoin's concerned, in my mind.
Mm. Yeah, one could say, Josh, that Elon Musk is to rocket science what you and I are to the fire service.
Yeah, pretty much exactly where I was going with that thought, yeah.
Some fire crawling in their skin.
The high taxes go towards the best firefighters in the country, right? Is that the way? That's the way it is?
It is kind of funny that we bitch about the taxes while we literally get paid by them.
Yep. That may or may not be the origin of the sloppy hog reference.
May or may not.
All right, I'll throw something in here and then we'll let you finish, Chris. I think it parlays well on this. I want to read 2 tweets. I want to go back to kind of first principles basics. And the reason for me thinking about this was the Pish-Lowry conversation on BTC 098.
Conversation.
Which is the most important Bitcoin conversation I've heard in a long time. I don't know what the time frame is, maybe 6 months to a year. This conversation is so important. We have a select list of resources on our website, and we just added it. We felt like it was so significant, and in many ways, such like a simple but original idea. So here's where I'm going with this. I'm going to read 2 tweets, one by Alex Gladstein and one by VJ Boyapati. Here's Gladstein's tweet. The fact that Bitcoin gives anyone property rights without the need for state enforcement or identification is a simply massive historical innovation that will take many decades for humanity to properly appreciate. Okay, the second tweet from VJ Boyapati. Property rights, as they are commonly understood, were necessary to provide an expectation of exclusive control for rivalrous resources. They require, this is the beginning. I'm not going to read the whole thread. I'm going to go down to the one I want here. Bitcoin provides, for the first time in history, the expectation of exclusive control without requiring an apparatus of coercion. In a way, it provides a sort of super property right. What I think this conversation between Pish and Lowry did for me was emphasize once again for the umpteenth time, Bitcoin is an innovation in digital property rights. But what actually enforces that property right into perpetuity indefinitely for years, decades, and centuries? And Lowry's thesis basically that you need real power hierarchies, not just abstract power hierarchies. You need a digital protocol that is somehow tethered to real world power, that being watts in the case of Bitcoin. That is the innovation. And this is like one of those ideas that you think clicks, but it's taken years to click for me. And I know there's people in the audience that have been down this rabbit hole and they get this, and there's many others that don't yet understand the implications of this. I would say listen to this conversation between Jason Lowry and Preston Pish, and then we'll also link Lynn Alden's piece on proof of stake. I think is maybe the best exhaustive rundown of why it's so important that proof of work be tethered to the real world. Did you guys listen to that conversation with those two? Are there any fresh thoughts or themes that are kind of coming back to the surface for you? Because they really hit me hard this week when I listened through that.
Yeah, a great episode. I agree. A lot of great topics in it. The one that really stuck out for me was when Jason Lowry was talking about domestication and how it weakens creatures. So specifically, he's like, yeah, you can take a boar and you can breed it to become a pig. You can take a wolf and you can breed it to become a dog. And then he, obviously looped it in with humans. Like, you've seen what we've done going off the gold standard since 1971. And shout out to WTF happened in 1971. I mean, they do it more justice of like how everything's gone wonky since coming off the gold standard and how we've, I guess, domesticated humans, or this new iteration of humans. I hate to say that we're going like techno humans, or like what the WEF says. I don't know if you guys have seen the AI generation of we're going to human to humanoid to like basically all plugged in technology. But I think that's a great point, and that was another thing that I took away from that conversation for sure.
Yeah, I can't even pick a part of that conversation off the top of my head, but it overall, it was all encompassing of explaining on a really, really granular detail about why proof of work is so incredibly important. And as far as commenting on people being domesticated, I think it's just as much of the money as it is the fact that we've stopped letting Darwin have any real say about humanity. Like, we all wear seatbelts, like maybe seatbelts really fucked us up. Maybe some people should have gone through the window.
We are. We're very tamed down, and it's a beautiful thing in a lot of ways in terms of the way we love and care for the species right now. But it comes with a reframing of how we're made up, and people are giant wusses, probably ourselves included. If they think about Neanderthal, what they had to do to survive.
You see a grown man riding his bicycle, right? Like, not, doing 50 miles an hour on it, just lollygagging around the neighborhood wearing a helmet. What do you got? Do you think about that person the way you think about somebody driving around wearing a mask by themselves? Like, I have no respect for a grown adult wearing a helmet on a bicycle. Like, it just bothers me on a fundamental level.
Or have some hardcore cyclists who've like sustained some injuries that are like, this guy's never ridden a bike.
Also, do you ever just want to hit those groups of bicyclists that are out on a Sunday, like wearing their spandex suits, just want to hit them? Because by the way, the entire road.
We can tell you from firsthand experience as medics, people sustain injuries on the roadway, dude. They're going at high speed, they're weaving through traffic, and they're always pissed at the motorists as though they belong there wearing their spandex.
I didn't think I was going to go off about bicyclists today.
That's our second part of the audience we lost tonight. It's anybody that's a legitimate road biker's like, fuck these guys.
They have no respect for my my craft.
Josh, in your defense, I haven't worn a helmet since I was like 8. So,
Me neither. I haven't worn a helmet either. I'm on a bike. Yeah. I understand if you're doing 30 miles an hour on a road bike, you should probably wear a helmet. But if you're just on a 10-speed bike on a gravel trail, like, come on. You don't need a helmet. You're going to be okay.
Yeah. To close this out before we hand it to you to go back to the topic of proof of work or proof of stake. I mentioned it a minute ago, but the more I'm in this space, the more I'm thinking about, okay, what problem is this actually solving? Because if it's better solved by a database or a more centralized system, you're going to be obsoleted. We're solving base layer human value transfer. One of the most fundamental forms of human language. You could argue in some ways the most fundamental. How is whatever's purporting to solve that problem going to hold up for a long fucking time? We are not talking a few years. We're not just talking our lifetime. What is going to have the chops to do that? And he talks in that podcast about exogenous versus endogenous accountability, basically, is the way I would put it. And if everything is internal, right, if everything's endogenous and it's relying on these abstract power hierarchies, at some point or another, it's going to be manipulated. You need a tether to the outside, an exogenous connection connected to some sort of physical power hierarchy. We have a non-violent form of that in watts and in energy. That is the discovery of Bitcoin. That is the whole point of this. And it is part of the reason why many Bitcoin maximalists are so passionate and so ardent, because there really is to solve this main problem. If you want to fucking transfer kitty pictures, we're having a different discussion. But if we're talking about underpinning the global financial system in a new, more decentralized, inclusive, empowering manner, we're going to need some external connection. And that is to real world energy. This conversation, I just closed by saying it hit me like a ton of freaking bricks.
Yeah.
Close us out, Chris.
All right, so we it's definitely bear market vibes in here. We saying all the problems in the world. I want to say in this week alone, so I'm just going to list these couple things that are awesome in the space. And honestly, at work, we cannot keep up with the amount of changes in building. I know bear markets are for building, but like perfect example, like Peach Bitcoin, not Beach Bitcoin. Peach Bitcoin, they were at Bitcoin Amsterdam. I know they released their alpha. It was cool seeing people use the mobile app to do P2P non-KYC exchange of cash for Bitcoin. Lily Wallet is another desktop app. I'm still a Sparrow maximalist. I know you guys love Sparrow as well. But it's cool to see another desktop wallet. That's awesome. It can be used to export to Blue Wallet, Caravan, or Bitcoin Core. The downside to it, I was messing around with it, is you have to pay for the multi-sig feature. So Sparrow kind of still reigns true in my heart. I don't know if you guys saw this video recently this week on Bitcoin Twitter of Keeper Wallet. It was on at TabConf. Someone had a cold card, a ledger, and a tap signer, and in a minute and 40 seconds, they set up a multi-sig. Obviously, the devices were already set, like their ledger and cold card. They had put their seed words down. But in a minute and 40 seconds on a mobile phone, they set up a multi-sig vault with using NFC for the tap signer, NFC for the cold card, and wired connection for the ledger. So a 2 or 3 multi-sig in a minute and 40 seconds is pretty incredible when you think about, like, you can't set up a bank that fast. I don't think you can write a check that fast and, like, put it there's so many transactions with the bank that you can't do in a minute and 40 seconds.
Get Guinness World Records on the horn here. Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. It was insane. Another one is the Jam app. It's Join Market created a graphical user interface. For those people that don't know, there's kind of 3 main coordinators, or not coordinators, I guess, coin join implementations. So there's Wasabi, Samurai, and Join Market. Join Market is the most decentralized, meaning that there's a team working on it, but it's fully peer-to-peer. You're basically exchanging UTXOs. Samurai and Wasabi are coordinators that you have to enter in order to coin join or obfuscate your UTXOs. Join Market was the best in sense of, like, there's less attack vectors. Like, there's a team for Samurai and Wasabi. The Join Market guys are very anonymous, and it runs decentralized, meaning that, like, you can go and shut down basically Samurai or Wasabi's coordinators, basically the servers they run on.
Right.
But Join Market's truly decentralized. So meaning they finally added a graphical user interface instead of being command line, which I don't know about you guys.
That makes a big deal for me, man.
Yeah.
I'm not as tech savvy.
That's a huge deal.
And it's a clean UX, like your graphical user interface for it. And definitely something that I want to experiment. I've experimented with both Wasabi before they went with chain analysis. We don't need to get into the nuance of that. And I've also messed with Samurai because they're so easy with Sparrow, but really, really cool. And then Azteco, I got a demonstration today on basically you can buy a voucher, non-KYC. So you can pay cash to buy a voucher to get non-KYC Bitcoin. So Azteco, so azte.co.com or .co. You can buy vouchers non-KYC. It's their way of routing around. They're not an exchange. You're basically buying just a gift card or the voucher that has sats on it. So very, very cool. You can do it in a non-KYC manner. And that was just this week alone. I literally can't keep up week to week with the number of changes of apps, of desktop wallets, like all these different implementations and improvements. Obviously, we've got Fedimint in the background. Taproot's been about a year, so we're starting to see the implementations of that. Taro was just launched. Like, the list goes on and on, gents. I know it's drinking from a fire hose, but a lot of cool shit going on in the space. And, I do this full time, and I literally cannot keep up with everything that's going on. So I don't know if there's any comments.
Dude,
there
what you're hitting on is just the theme that I think what's really compelling for me in this bear market is price and fundamentals are not connected. You have, I just saw today, the numbers are hash rates up 45% while price is down 60%. We've got an increase of reachable nodes on the network during a 60% price cutoff.
Dan, we're so lucky we didn't buy those fucking miners, man.
Yeah, we are. We would have gotten taken out to the freaking woodshed.
So bad.
Oh my God.
Thank God we didn't do that.
Is it bottom for miners now? Do you buy them now? I've seen they're pretty cheap.
I think it might be the time to buy miners, man. But we were talking about it when these, S19s were at like 12K. And the price
I saw
of Bitcoin
14.5 and they were like crazy. Yeah,
dude.
Like,
if we would have bought those, we would have taken a fucking bath of all lifetime, man.
Yes, we would have.
You know what? This bear market feels a lot like 2019 to me right now. We've been sitting stagnant for a long period of time. Unfortunately, in 2019, right after that happened, we dropped to 3. And then we started seeing it recover and go back to, 70 grand. But just hang in there, man. DCA, continue to, just stay above water. Don't get yourself leveraged, as we always say. And one thing I've been playing around with, I switched my node to Start 9, trying Embassy OS. And shout out to those guys. It's been pretty seamless. It's still catching up to it's re-downloading the blockchain right now. So I haven't done any transactions with it or anything yet, but so far super easy to deploy. Very nice looking GUI. Try it out. If you don't have a node, try an Embassy OS by Start 9.
Yeah. Exciting time. Price and fundamentals are divorced from one another. And when you do really think about this shit, man, reachable nodes going up, lightning capacity going up, Tor rolling out, Fediment, Taro rolling out. Like there's so much happening and there's so much being built to level up the next go round. But man, it is hard to convince people at this stage. And it's why I've said before, like, it's almost like, unfortunately, as much as it hurts, you're just going to need to wait for price to go parabolic again, for your phone to start ringing. And then that's your next opportunity to get through to a lot of people. But in the meantime, we're DCA and stacking the shit out of it. Have you seen these people I've seen some people on Twitter talking shit about DCAing as though like everybody that's DCA'd for the last 2 years is down. Well, no duh. We're at the bottom of a bear market. Like, I don't understand that. If you're averaging into an asset that you think has tremendous long-term upside and potential, and from past experience that your human behavior has gotten in your way of buying it at the proper price, how can you argue against somebody averaging into it? Has anyone seen this on Twitter? Like, people kind of talking shit about DCAing?
Maybe it's just the beers hitting me, but that's fiat as fuck. If your unit of account is sats, it's going up. You're not down at all. It's continually graphing up to the right. So I don't know what they're talking about.
There's no one in the space that can't honestly say that they lump sum bought at the wrong time. Like, it just happens. Sure. Like, I did it. We've both done it. And I've also done the opposite. I've sold at the worst time. And I've taught myself this lesson time and time again. Like, just sit tight and keep buying incrementally as you go. It is the best plan. Unless you actually are that 1 to 1.5% good trader, and you're probably not, if you're going to be honest with yourself.
Chris, end this with a handoff. Thanks for coming, man.
Thanks, guys, for having me on. If you guys want to follow what we're doing at Bitcoin Magazine, you can follow us on all platforms, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, you name it. My Twitter handle is Chris Alaimo6, Alaimo spelled ALAIMO 6. Make sure to check out Bitcoin Amsterdam next year. Bitcoin 2023 coming up next May. Hope I'll see both of you gents there. I know there. Josh, you were there, and I wasn't able to see you. I was so busy working.
Yeah. That was a bummer. We'll definitely catch up.
We'll be there, and we better get on Sailor's yacht. Okay, Michael? You hear that?
Yeah, we're looking for those. Punch our tickets, would you?
Yeah, definitely. You can use code BMLive to get 10% off your tickets, so you guys can use it or any of your listeners. And then also we've got Bitcoin Magazine, great magazine, the censorship-resistant issue. I'm really excited for the Orange Party issue that's dropping. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read Bukele's letter. It's his letter that came out. We released it digitally, but it's going to be in the Orange Party issue. Basically, long story short, it's fuck you to the IMF. He calls out a lot of people in the Western world for saying what he's doing with Bitcoin. That's pretty much all I got for that. Thanks, Dan and Josh, for having me on. It's been a pleasure. It's been a blast being here. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.
Thanks, Chris. We enjoyed it.